I'm putting this QR code up as we're getting started here. And at the same time, Brooke has just released the first poll. I'm going to put the QR code up at the end too. If you can take your smartphone cameras out and just open your camera and hit on the little link that comes up. It's helpful for me to know what your thoughts are about the class today. It helps me to improve. It helps the university know what I'm doing and how I'm doing. And the questions on the poll are also equally as important because we need to report back on our audience and their perceptions. So I appreciate you doing both. And again, I'll put the QR code up at the end if you want to go ahead and do the poll now. All right, so let's get started. The first thing I'd like to kind of cover with you is a little bit about stress and how it influences our health. So according to an article in the Health Psychology Review, stress can influence our health in two ways. It's broken into two sections, which you can see on the screen there are direct and indirect. Direct and go ahead. Oh, it's not going. All right, the second one's not popping up there, but there's an arrow for indirect as well. The direct effect of stress on our health are there's biological pathways. So it means that there are effects on our bodies with things like disease, risk of hypertension, stroke, obesity, immune function, and acceleration of the aging process. So those direct biological pathways can cause stressors and be caused by stress sometimes too as well. Sometimes they're hereditary factors, but those are direct influences. Also, next are the indirect effects of stress, and that would mean behavior pathways, and they're influenced, their habits influenced by habits and both habits and non-habitual behavior. This model demonstrates how stress impacts us by both generating disease and changing our habits. A good example of how stress can impact our behavior pathways would be going back to the good old favorite COVID-19 and the pandemic. The stress so many people felt during the pandemic, from fear of becoming sick or loss of a loved one, or maybe, fear of loss of a loved one or experienced the loss. Some people had job loss. There was new work scenarios, children being schooled at home, lack of socialization because of lockdowns. They all contributed to stress during this time period. And so that's an example of how like an indirect behavior pathway can impact how we behave. And that I'm bringing this up because it, is a good example. I know I talked to a lot of people that either said, one, they gained weight because they were stress eating during the pandemic because of the change in behavior that we had that was indirect to us, but, did impact us directly. And then some people also had a hard time maintaining a healthy weight or losing weight because of the stress they were unable to eat. And I include both scenarios throughout this talk because you do need to recognize that, yes, some of us stress eat, but some of us, because of stress, can't eat, and it prevents us from having a healthy appetite. And both can be impactful to our lifestyles and maintaining our health. Oh, there goes that arrow, of course. All right, so let's talk a little bit about COVID-19 and how that changed weight outcomes in Americans. Again, to kind of build off of that idea of stress, just trying to give you a little history and context here. So we look a little closer at the stress factors during the pandemic and how that pertains to weight. You'll recall that, I mentioned those biological pathways, and they include obesity. And this tells us that stress can contribute to obesity or the inability to maintain a healthy weight. Again, we had a lot of stressful times during COVID-19 in a variety of ways. And this study that's referenced here with the bars was published in the National Library of Medicine, and it examined specifically weight gain during COVID-19. And they found that 48% of adults gained weight during the pandemic, 34% stayed about the same, and 18% lost weight. So there was a large number of people that did have a weight gain during that. I'm included in that. And this really shows the correlation between the stressful times and weight gain for people, and how those stressors can really impact our weight gain. Also, the study took a further look at those with mental health concerns. So some people that might have already been having mental health concerns or that developed them during the pandemic. And they found that the weight gain was statistically significantly higher in those that had anxiety. So those that had anxiety, 53% of those had weight gain, and 52% of those for depression, as well as 52% greater for those who had both anxiety and depression symptoms. And again, I'm using this example to show how stress can affect not only our habits, but also our physical health, as is shown in these examples, using the pandemic as the stressor. And next, I'm showing here how understanding stress eating is important to improve the health behavior. So I gave you an example of how it can impact us. And now let's understand a little bit better what happens when we stress eat. So we saw those examples in the weight gain from, maybe moving less or stressing during uncontrollable times with what happened in the pandemic. And what happens during these stressful times is we often have a change in our eating patterns. They sometimes include high fat, high sugar, and high sodium foods, and cravings for those foods. High fat, high sugar foods are called hyperpalatable foods, and consuming them when we're stressed provides us with a false sense of comfort. So you can see here in the little circular thing, we have a change in the eating pattern. It's kind of cyclical. We have a desire for palatable foods, and then we have compulsive behavior. So stress causes, is a direct cause of all of these things, and it kind of goes round and round. So we might be having a change in our eating pattern. So maybe, we're a little stressed, we didn't eat healthy, and then we have a desire for a hyperpalatable food, which again are those high fat, high sugar, high sodium or salt foods, and then we have a compulsive behavior to try to create that comfort. So this just gives you a little idea about how stress can impact the way we actually eat. So I want to take a minute, and if you're comfortable, you can put this in the chat, but maybe think about a little bit about why and when you're choosing these hyperpalliative foods. So, I know for me, I was actually, before we got on the call, Brooke and I were just saying, like, during the winter time, I'm a little bored, you can't be outside as much. So I find that I desire in the evening a little bit more hyperpalliative food. So if anybody wants to share and put it in the chat, like when or why they choose hyperpalliative foods, you can go ahead and put that in, and we'll see whether there's a lot of common area on that, to come up with that idea. Nope, nobody's going to give me any ideas what they have. All right, well, that's okay. If you think of something as we talk about when when or why you choose hyperpalliative foods, then go ahead and put it in the chat. Oh, we got somebody. Thank you. Nacho chips late afternoon or nighttime. So it sounds like maybe a salty craving. Yeah. I go through those too with the salty craving. Sometimes like, oh, I could really use something salty. And sometimes, and we'll discuss this a little bit. Sometimes it can be that you're craving something salty from a stress, but it could be also your body's reaction to something. So there could be a stressor, as we mentioned in the beginning, but your body might also be, wanting something else, and that's why it's craving that salty food. So we'll talk about that in just a second. So as we're going to move on here a little bit, because I know we have the effort of time, but some things we can do or think about when, like, we're thinking about the when and why, what's happening with our body. So as I just mentioned, maybe you're craving something salty because something else is going on with your body. You want to ask yourself, are you tired? And as we'll talk about here, sometimes we crave certain foods when we're tired and we don't have a lot of energy. Also, am I hungry? It's a good idea to ask your body when you're thinking of these things, are you hungry? Because it's sometimes overlooked, like we think we're hungry, but we're really not. How about, was I stressed today? Was today's a stressful day at work or a stressful day at home? What happened during the day that made me feel like I need to eat whatever it is I'm craving? How about, am I sad? Sometimes we're just blue. A lot of people this time of year experience winter blues, and that's a real thing. So being sad could be a reason that maybe you're eating some hyperpalliative food or craving them. How about, are you lonely? Maybe you just don't have anything to do, you don't have anybody to talk to, and you're a little bit lonely. Or am I bored? all reasons why we seek hyperpalliative foods. So this might be why you're doing it. So just take a minute when you're thinking, and we'll go over this a couple times again, but as you're craving or thinking about why you're stress eating or why you're even eating at all, ask yourself when and why you're choosing that hyperpalliative food, because these are all reasons that people do choose hyperpalliative food. So it's important to ask yourself what's going on there. It's also important for you to come up with strategies. So I'm going to give you one here. We'll go over this a little bit more in depth, but we're going to talk about ways to be more thoughtful, or oftentimes called mindful, before grabbing for something to eat. So what you want to do is you want to think, listen, and plan before you dig into those hyperpalliative foods that are either really sugary, salty, or fatty. Think first what you're going to do and stop and slow down before grabbing just anything to eat. Think about what you are doing. And if you find yourself all of a sudden grabbing for that bag of chips and, uncontrollably eating handfuls after a handful, then try to take a minute before you do that, and think about it and stop. It could be a good idea to measure out those chips and have an idea about what you're going to eat instead of eating the whole bag. I'm not saying, you can eat the chips, but maybe being a little bit more mindful about how you're eating those. So you want to think about that. You also want to listen. You want to listen to your body's cues. And again, we'll go a little bit more in depth, but think about those hunger signals. Do you really feel hungry? Or are you feeling one of those other things we just talked about on the slide? Are you bored? Are you sad? Are you lightheaded? That you feel like you're a little lightheaded, so you do need to eat, or are you feeling a little bit emotional about something, as we talked about. Then finally, you also want to plan. You want to plan so that you avoid opportunities to have stressful eating times, or maybe plan also to have something available that will allow you to make a better choice than one of those hyperpalliative foods. All right, so let's get a little bit more in depth in this. So in the process of thinking, you want to ask yourself some questions. They're on the slide there. You want to try to take a pause and look through the cabinets, instead of looking through the cabinets for whatever's on hand, like a sugary, fat, or salty object, those hyperpalliative foods. Ask yourself first, are you stressed? What's going on with your body? What are you feeling? Take a minute, maybe a couple deep breaths. I was thinking about this last night. There's actually evidence that if you take, 7 to 10 deep breaths, it can really help you to calm down and be better focused. It gets all the different endorphins going in your body. So it can be really helpful to being more in the present instead of jumping into things. I do it sometimes before I do a presentation. I do it sometimes if I'm really stressed, or, if I'm going in for an interview or an important meeting, because it really can help us give us the ability to have better insight. So if you're feeling you're reaching for that, maybe one of the things you can do is grab, instead of grabbing for it right away, just take those deep breaths. You also wanted to ask yourself, is it time to eat? Obviously we have meal times, but check in, is it really time for me to have something to eat? When was the last time I ate? Maybe you've just gone too long of a stretch and now you really need to eat something. And also ask yourself when you plan to eat again. So if it's in between, a lot of times we have desire for sugary things in the middle of the day because there's a big span between lunch and dinner. And when that happens, our body's seeking energy, so we might crave those sugary things. So to avoid that, it might be a good idea to, have a little snack, plan your snack, like I said, as one of the techniques here, plan to take with you during the day what you're going to take for that late afternoon snack. So you avoid some of those hyperpalliative foods. Again, take time out during the day to breathe, or give yourself a grown-up timeout, I call them sometimes. I used, you used to put the kids in timeout, and it's good for us as grown-ups to have timeout and away from what we're doing in the day, so we can have a time to relax and be able to reflect consciously rather than, intrinsically grabbing for things that we think we need because we're stressed. It's important to recognize too that when we are stressed and we're in continual stress mode, when things are not going quite right and we're finding that we're stressing a lot, that can put our bodies into a constant state of fight or flight. So that could make us be really edgy. And so somebody, maybe somebody sends you an email at work and you're just really edgy and you take it the wrong way and you respond back in a not so great way that doesn't help you in the long run and causes more stress. Those types of situations where you're quick to fly off the handle, and maybe not be so relaxed, they can be built up over time. And so that's why, again, it comes back to finding those adult timeouts and finding times to kind of rest. And it takes practice. So if you're having a hard time sleeping at night, maybe it seems ridiculous, but taking time throughout the day to just quietly sit and breathe, or just quietly try to clear your mind from distractions, that can help you to not be in that hyper sense of fight or flight all the time with stress. So it can help to train your mind to be less stressed. It'll help you sleep better. It'll help you eat better. And it'll give you better overall perspective, to reduce your stress and continue reducing your stress. So take time to try to find ways to do that. Also, when I mentioned don't wait, about the stress and anxiety, I did mention asking yourself when you ate last. Make sure to have regular meals, to try not to miss meals, so that you're not finding that you're reaching for things to replace. I know personally, when I get home after work, sometimes I'm really hungry, and as I'm cooking dinner, I'm like eating things and that's going to ruin my meal. So try to plan for when you're going to eat next. Ask yourself when you ate last, and ask yourself maybe if you need to take a break to eat something that could be a little more beneficial for a healthy lifestyle than one of the hyperpalliative foods. Again, snacks between meals help to nourish your body. Some people like to avoid snacks. They can be a good thing because they can get you through, so you're not grabbing at things in the heat of the hunger for you. And then also trying to figure out when you're going to eat next again, so that you can say, okay, well, dinner's in a half an hour. If I can just hold over for that, I should be able to get through, to get to the next meal without grabbing for something that is being eaten in the heat of the moment. Otherwise, other ways besides meditating, a good thing to do is try to maybe think in terms of going for a walk to avoid stress eating, or taking 10 minutes to just pause your emotion that you're having, that's craving for that. A lot of times if we wait 10 minutes, we realize we don't really want whatever it is we're craving or stress eating about. So if you can take that 10 minutes, it can be very helpful. The other thing is, when you do eat, adding flavor to your food. When we cook and eat things that are flavorful, have a lot of smell and aroma. Think about when you go out to a really good restaurant, it comes out, it looks real pretty, and it's very flavorful, and you can take a minute and smell how good it smells, and you just want to eat that. If you add flavor to your dishes when you're making them, that can help you to avoid hyperpalliative foods too, because it allows you to really taste the food and appreciate the food and be mindful of the food. So try adding things like herbs and spices to food to flavor them up and make them more tasty and enjoyable. We also know that as we age, the taste buds on our tongue are not as acute or in tune as they were when we were younger. So a lot of times we add salty things to foods to get more flavor, so we can taste them with our taste buds. So if you, instead of adding those salty things to your meals, if you add flavor naturally with herbs and spices, that can be really helpful too. And then it'll stop that trend of always wanting that salty food. Once we start craving them, we tend to keep going with them. Try to eat foods that you enjoy and that are good for us. Try to make substitutions where appropriate. So if you have, things like the flavors that I'm mentioning, that could be helpful too. If you're having cravings for something sweet, try to substitute something. So maybe instead of in the evening, if you're having that time frame where you're like, oh, I just ate dinner an hour ago, probably am not hungry, but I really would love to have something sweet. Try to reach for a piece of fruit instead of that candy. The fruit, yes, it has carbohydrates in it and things, but it has natural occurring carbohydrates. It has fiber, natural sugars. So it's going to be a lot better than the empty calories of, say a sweet treat, like a piece of cake or candy or something. So that fruit can go a long way in nourishing your body. Try to have those options available for yourself readily, like fruit. Choose to buy those things and have them in the house and eat them because they're more nutrient dense. And then if you really need that piece of chocolate, maybe think about dipping the chocolate, a strawberry in a little bit of chocolate. So you're still getting a little bit of chocolate, but you're also getting the strawberry that has that fiber attached to it that's good for us and has a lot of vitamins and minerals that the chocolate alone does not. So the other thing is maybe filling that kitchen with really good food. Again, Brooke and I were just talking about this. If it's there, I'm going to seek to eat it, even if I'm not really hungry. But if I replace that with fruit and have that healthier option in the house to get the sweet thing, then I'm more likely to grab it and eat it. So good thing to think about is having the fruit pre-washed and prepared, maybe on the counter where you see it. So you're seeing it over that treat that might not be so interesting if you're stressed out and reaching for something to, hit that sweet craving of that palatable food, hyperpalatable food. All right, so then we also want to think about the listen. This is part of this too. We want to listen to our body. Our body sends us cues, and they're natural cues. They're good for us. Things like our stomach growling, that's a cue that we're hungry. So we want to pay attention to that. If you're feeling rushed and overwhelmed, you're probably not going to be as likely to pay attention to that growling stomach and what could be nutritious for us, but probably grabbing something quickly. So pay attention to what your body's telling you, how you're feeling, so that you have an understanding. Again, taking time out of the day to evaluate how your body's feeling is going to make it a lot more likely that you'll understand those cues. So that's important, having that time throughout the day to listen to the signals for when to eat and what to eat will certainly help you in the event that you're stressed out and going to eat. So some ways we can listen to those cues for body and hunger cues and decide, okay, maybe I'm not really hungry. Maybe take a walk. I talked about this a little bit in a couple slides ago. Going outside, taking a walk, getting fresh air. There's so many benefits to it, and more science is coming out and research about this. The ability of being in nature and de-stressing is really, really helpful. And it helps us to avoid those hyperpalliative foods, and it helps us cope with stress as well. So they're finding, if you get out and exercise, it can help you to deal with stress, improve anxiety, depression, mental health. So if you're having a desire to eat something that's, a stress eating, or you're grabbing for something when you just ate a meal and maybe not the best choice, then try going out for a walk. It only needs to be a couple minutes to change your mind. It also helps to remove you from the current situation so that you have a distraction. A lot of times too, we'll think that we're hungry or need something to eat, but really we're just thirsty. So try to find a way, have some water available, take it to work with you in case you run into stressful situations, but have that water available or something healthy to drink so that you can fill that thirst so that you're not mistaking it for hunger instead. It's always good to try maybe drinking a little bit of water beforehand. Another trick that I mentioned earlier too is to wait 10 minutes. So in the counseling I've done, both for to help people quit smoking as well as to help people with stress eating, we always suggest waiting that 10 minutes. A lot of times it goes away after 10 minutes. So if you can find a way to distract yourself for 10 minutes or even set a timer and say, okay, I'm going to wait 10 minutes before I dive into this. Then if you do go in, still need it after 10 minutes, that's okay. Try to portion out what you're eating. So a lot of times what happens is, they have portion sizes on the back of the container for packaged food. And we just take that package and start eating, out of it. I had a friend one time that told me the reason some cookies are served in little pouches is because you're supposed to eat the whole bag, and that is not true at all. It was a good, funny idea, but if we start eating out of a bag or container, we're a lot less likely to recognize how much we're eating. So what I try to do, even with healthy foods like nuts, so nuts are good and healthy foods. They, have a lot of good compounds to them. They fill us up, they have fiber. Even eating too much of a good food can cause us to eat more than we're supposed to. So when I eat a product like, say, peanuts, if I decide to have peanuts for a snack in the evening, I measure them out in a little container. So I'm not just sitting there eating out of the container, because before you know it, half the container's gone. And that's a really high caloric product. So I'm eating a lot more calories than probably I need to if I don't measure it out. So be sure, wait the 10 minutes. And then if you still need to eat something, go and grab a measurement or a small container that you can measure that out. So you still get, the sensation from that, but you're not eating quite as much. Then the next thing you want to do is try to avoid distractions. A lot of times when we're eating, we're on the computer, maybe at lunchtime, or we're on the phone eating, watching TV. So try to avoid distractions and be aware of what you're eating and how you're eating it. Be in the moment, I guess, is a good way. The final plan, as we discussed in the beginning of the presentation, those sugary, salty, and fatty foods accompanied by stress can really make a pattern for us that causes us to overeat those empty calorie foods that we should avoid. So choose foods like fruits and vegetables. We like the crunch a lot, and that's where some of those hyperpalatable foods come in. Maybe have those fruits and vegetables cut up or pre-washed so that you can use them for nourishment in your body. So planning ahead so that you have them available, and it's a lot easier. If it's easier to grab a bag of chips, you're probably going to grab them. But if you have maybe something cut up that's crunchy and better nourishment for you, you have the opportunity to grab that. So check out how to do that, by preparing ahead of time or planning ahead of time. And also be positive with your choices and your food. Positivity in our lives, reinforcing ourselves and giving ourselves positive attributes. That's a good way to stay stress-free and help reduce stress. So try to think in the positive. And remember that, eating serves a very important purpose for us. It's to nourish our body. So when you're thinking about what you're stressed about, nourishing your body can help to reduce stress. So think about ways that you can plan ahead to reduce stress in the long run. So when you're hurried and feeling some stress, you're making good choices. So to plan for stress eating, a good way to do that is to include all 5 food groups at every meal. Eat those balanced meals so you're loading up on foods that are nutritious and making your body feel good versus high calorie, hyperpalliative foods. The 5 food groups, if you eat from the 5 food groups, you're going to have less room to eat foods that are not on the My Plate model. And that's going to make you feel better, sleep better, be less stressed, have better workouts. Make sure to eat something before going to the store when you go food shopping, because if you go hungry and you're short on time, you're going to impulse buy, and you're going to be buying a lot of those hyperpalliative foods we've been discussing today. And then they're going to be there. So when you're stressed, so plan ahead, make a list, go to the grocery store on a full stomach after you've had a good meal. Shop the outside of the grocery store. The outside, the first aisle, the back, and the side are where less processed foods are and more whole foods are. So you want to shop those aisles, and that'll help you to get healthy food that's manageable and is going to stop you from having those hyperpalliative foods on hand. I feel like if you have to stop somewhere to get it, at a convenience store, then you're less likely to grab it than if you're if it's in the house where you can do it. Try to buy those foods from the 5 food groups that are whole foods in those outside aisles. And again, make sure you're eating whole foods. So a whole food example would be like an apple or a cherry. They don't have any additives in them. They are a whole food. And they don't have a label on them because the only ingredient is that apple. So you want to do that eating whole foods will help us avoid those processed foods that are a lot of times those hyperpalliative foods. I mentioned before to watch portions. That's part of planning as well as thinking. And so watch the portions, look at the food label for what the portion size is. Remember that the portion size is based on a person with a 2,000 calorie a day diet. Not everybody, that's the average. 2,000 calories a day is an average. Some people need more depending on their age, activity level, and gender. Some people need less. So make sure you're eating for what you need and have that portion size ready. Also, make sure that you have food that feeds your soul. Try to find time to appreciate what you're eating and how it is prepared, how it makes you feel, the aromas in it, where you're eating, share company, good company at the table, and try to have things that make you feel stress-free, and be aware of your eating. If you're aware of what's going on when you're eating, you're going to be a lot less likely to want to go out and grab some of those foods we've been talking about today. Try to reduce your stress. It can be hard, but stress and sleep go hand in hand. Sometimes people are stressed, so they don't sleep, and vice versa. So try to find ways to de-stress. I mentioned a few: exercise, working on balancing your habits, and trying to take time to yourself every day to unplug and de-stress is very important. And on our YouTube channel, I'll give you an email after this class, but there's some classes on there that can help you with those keys as well. And then again, try to get enough exercise. That includes 150 minutes, at least, to 300 minutes of moderate exercise a week, cardiovascular exercise, that is. And then you also want to make sure that you're adding 2 days in with some type of strength training. And that'll help you with all around avoiding stress eating. So some techniques to become a mindful eater. We've talked about a few of these already. It's important because if you're a mindful eater, you're a lot less likely to be grabbing and eating stressfully. Find time that is just for mealtime, so you're not doing other things. You're not in front of the TV. You're sitting in a specific area designated for your meal. You're, making meal the activity, not other things, not the sidebar. It's just the activity. Try to take time to enjoy the crunch of food, the way it feels on your tongue, the taste of it, the smell of it. When you do a wine tasting, you smell the aromas and all that thing. Do that with your meals as well. Try to add things that have good taste and flavor to them, like ginger, basil, cilantro, parsley, things that you're going to taste, and be aware of them. And really take time to savor that flavor and enjoy them, so that, when it comes time to stress eat, you're like, well, I don't really want that. I don't have anything. It's not offering me anything that I'm interested in. Be mindful of those cues when you're truly hungry, maybe being lightheaded or your stomach's growling. And eat to nourish yourself. Pick tasty foods that you enjoy, that you feel nourished from, that give you energy. And try not to eat just for emotional emptiness. Try to make sure that you're doing it for the physicality of it, not the emotional side of it. Eat what you want. Don't eat things to fill a void or something that won't nourish your body. So say to yourself, like, what am I really getting out of this? How is this helping me? Because food is really there to nourish the body and make us feel good. Try to enjoy your surroundings. Stop eating when you're full. I know some people will put the fork down in between bites, or if you're enjoying company, enjoy that, but also be aware of how much you're eating. Don't rush through your meal. Enjoy the conversation, but at the same time, be aware of what you're eating. And finally, to be really mindful eater, you want to be in the moment and recognizing what you're doing and how you're doing it. It's something that's hard to do these days, to be in the moment, but it's really worth it to avoid stress eating. All right, so to wrap up, keys to preventing eating stressfully. We want to eat regular, well-balanced meals so that we don't have those gaps in there. Thank you. Brooke has just released that final poll for me, if you could be so kind as to take that. You want to be sure not to deprive yourself. Going long stretches without eating or food deprivation can be detrimental and make you want to grab and eat things that are not necessarily what we should be eating. So don't go a long way to deprive yourself. You also want to pay attention to the cues, both of your body and what's going on in your life. So for instance, if you're feeling really stressed, take a minute to recognize why that is. If you can improve it, then try to find activities that can de-stress you a little bit better to reduce that stress. You want to eat to be nourished, as we just talked about in the last slide. The food is there to feed our body and make us, function well and do the things it's supposed to do. The body's an incredible thing, but we want to make sure we're nourishing that in a good way. And also we want to take time to de-stress and, find ways to cope with stress in our life that's healthy, other than eating hyperpalliative foods. So just some pointers there. It takes a while. All of the, I always suggest in my talks that you want to make sure to take small steps, and that's important to being healthy. This is the QR code again that I said I'd put out. If you could just take a minute and put that up on your phone and answer the questions there, that would be great. It's very helpful to me. And as we're doing that, I just wanted to send out a little bit of a reminder of what we're going to be doing coming up. Some of the classes FCHS is going to be offering in the next few months. We have a lunch and learn that is done both in person and virtually, February 18th. In person, we'll be at the Ocean City Library, and we'll be streaming that from the library virtually if you'd like to join us. We also have a lunch and learn March 6th, which is virtual. It's the benefits of exercise. Excuse me. So if you're looking for ways to pull that idea, some of the ideas into these classes both offer that. March 6th in the evening, I'll be at Ocean City Library doing unfounded food claims. March 18th is a lunch and learn with the 8 dimensions of wellness, focusing on physical wellness. And then March 19th, we have a kids cooking club. This is limited registration. We only take so many people for it. Is for children ages 8 to 12. And we're going to focus on the fruit and vegetable group, and we do some cooking with them. And, we know that if kids prepare it, they're more likely to eat it. So it helps to encourage them to be healthy eaters and less picky. And there's registration required for that. That one does have a fee just to pay for the food. But the rest of them are all free. So I hope that you'll find time to enjoy some of them. I mentioned before that we have our free information that's on the screen now. And you can go on there to get more information and register for some of the classes that I just spoke about. So I just want to touch on really quick some of the comments people put into the chat. Somebody said that afternoon is a hard time for them too. And again, that goes along with thinking about the between meal gaps. And it's good to recognize when you're going to have that and pack things to bring with you to work or wherever you are. And somebody said too, having the grapes available helps instead of eating the processed food. And the grapes are crunchy, they're sweet. And the good part about them is they have, they're lower in calories than hyperpalliative food. And they also have the crunch to them and a little bit of sweetness. So they're really good. And sometimes I like to mix up my snacks like that. Like I might have a sweet thing like grapes and maybe some low fat cheese or something with them to give a little bit of the salt and the sweet with them. So there's a lot of ideas out there, and I encourage you to be creative with them. Think about seasonal things that are available, so they're cost effective. Apples keep really well, and they're great with a nut butter on the side, because then you have that crunch and you have a little bit of the savory in there too. So think about those things, portion them out, and just plan ahead and try to find ways to be prepared for when that stressful situation rears its head and says, hey, let's just go have at this hyperpalliative food. And that's going to go a long way to help you.